Before I dive in, I gotta ask, is it true that instead of morning coffee, you just count your money until you're energized enough for the day?
What do you think?
All right. First question. If you had to distill your entire philosophy down to a too long, didn't read version, what is it?
Hmm. It would be the only way to have freedom is through ownership, and
Mm,
the world doesn't want to give it to you. And that message is for every human who's felt disenfranchised and is a little bit of tired of other people directing their
mm-hmm,
lives and wishes that they had their hand on the helm
mm.
instead. And I think in today's day and age, ownership is something that people on high say is bad. Fuck the big guys, the rich
Yeah.
people, the owners. And in reality, that's just them saying they want to be in charge instead of you.
Hmm. Now, along the thread of ownership, I feel like there's another word that goes hand in hand with ownership. But everyone nowadays seem to hate this idea of grinding. Hustle culture is almost becoming a derogatory term. It's something that's almost frowned upon. But you lean into it. Why?
It kind of goes back to what we know to be true. It sucks being broke just as much as it sucks working hard. And so choose your heart.
You seem to have built this massive following online, and it almost feels like you're getting more attention than a lot of the major news networks. Um, it seems like these days the guy or gal with the iPhone gets more attention than your regular news channel. Um, why do you think that is?
That's interesting. It's hard right now to not think about politics in some way, shape, or form. And so I think
Mm,
when I think about politics today, what I really think about is who's in charge, right? And so I do think about why does one politician hit a chord? Why does one not? And and I think when I think about my message, what hits me closest to home is that for some reason, um, a message right now is feeling true for many people in the world that there's a lack of trust, like trust in institutions, trust in governments and big corporations, in the media. I saw
mm.
yesterday an article about CNN. This is fascinating. How many views do you think CNN got in prime time for 1 week, 3-hour segments every day, prime time for 1 week in May? What do you think?
Mm, one show.
One show, 3 hours for a week.
I'm gonna say I don't know, 10 to 80 million views.
83,000.
Wow, that's crazy. That's like 10 times less than what I guessed.
Lowest level of all time. Fox at the highest was 186,000. Think about what is happening right in front of us. The media is no longer actually reaching the masses because they've lost complete trust with them. In fact,
Mm,
30-year-olds right now, for the first time ever, 30-year-olds have more trust in you, social media influencers, than
mm,
they do the mainstream media. It's not the same for all
wow.
age groups. But that is what I am seeing right in front of us is we're like, show me what's real because I do not trust puppets who parrot things from teleprompters. They know that you and I are having a real conversation. There's no
Hmm.
teleprompter in sight. When you look at your notes, you look at your notes. It's real.
Yeah.
And I think that is what I'm realizing with our message. We have to be honest because nobody trusts anybody right
Mm.
now.
I mean, even myself, I don't have a cable subscription. I get most of my news from two places, Twitter and YouTube podcast. And that's about it. I haven't watched CNN or Fox or NBC um, probably since I was in college, which was not that long ago, but kind of a long time ago. Okay. So we're talking about this shift that's happening in the world. But for everyone who's still early in their career, what's your advice? Even myself, I had this thought that if I was younger when I had an unlimited ball of energy at like 18, 19, 20. I should have probably done some things differently. Then I maybe would be X amount ahead of where I am now. But, for anyone that is still in, and I guess I'm still early in my life, but for anyone else who is still in that early phase of life, what is your number one advice?
The best advice for a 20-year-old is to realize that your 20s do suck, that you are probably drinking too much. You're hanging out with people that aren't the best versions of themselves. Neither are you. You've got crazy hormones going on. You're going to bars and hanging out with people, having a few too many drinks, and then
Mm,
going to a job you kind of
mhm,
hate because you're brand new into the workforce. And so, of course, you're doing the worst thing humanly possible. And that's going to continue for like 5 to 10 years. Like you are going to do a $65,000 a year job for 2 or 3 years that sucks. And you're going to have no time for
mm,
anything except what your boss asks of you. And I wish people had told me that, because if you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you're like, oh, okay, like I can do this for 2 or 3 years. I can learn, I can grow, and I can suck it up for 2 to 3 years. And then after that, I get a little bit better and a little bit better and a
mhm,
little bit better. And so the advice would be, when you have a foot in your nail, which is what it's like when you start your first job being 20, don't, try to ignore the fact that it's painful. It's there. Like it's there, it's real, it sucks. And I wish somebody had told me that, because these days everybody's like, "No, you can be a 20-year-old and drive a Bugatti and, I don't know, play around with crypto." Not real. Not real. And then once I
True.
learned, like, okay, this sucks and I can deal with it, then the next thing would be, everybody focuses on how much money you make when you're in your 20s. Huge mistake. The only thing you should
Mm,
focus on is learning. How can I think about my salary like putting pieces of cash into my brain? How can I learn as much as possible? How can I come and work an apprentice for somebody that I think I might want their life one day?
mhm.
And I'll take the minimum amount of cash that I need in order to fill my brain so that my next step can be to make more money. But in the beginning, too many people obsess on money. And I wish I hadn't thought that way. I would
Mhm.
rather learn than earn when I'm young.
Put cash into your brain. Learn before you earn. Some people say enjoy your youth, but for you, it's like suffer on purpose so that you can get to your goal faster. Um, can you elaborate more on that? Okay, so you're putting in the work early in your 20s. What is the next thing? For example, the one thing that I realized that I really wish I had learned earlier is the power of the people around you and networking. I've always heard your network is your net worth, but you don't realize how powerful it is until you start doing it. And even when you start doing it, you don't see the effects right away. I mean, like most things in life, it takes time. And so you may start networking for a few months and you're like, oh, I haven't, I'm not a millionaire yet, or I haven't met Elon Musk or whoever. Um, and so you just quit. But what I've learned is the domino effect of networking. It happens like years later, honestly. And so they say, take the average of 7 people who you're around the most, and you become like them. And so I feel like finding access to the right person is literally a shortcut that's often overlooked and misunderstood. Um, so where do you really start? How do you get there? What's the secret to networking truly and with intention?
Start with concentric circles. So start with what's closest to you. So, for instance, who's the richest guy on your block? Who's the richest guy in your community? Who's the richest guy that you can get to, or gal you can get to?
What if there's no one there?
There's no way. First of all, you're like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? So what I would say is, it's just a numbers game. There's somebody, maybe they're only making a couple 100K a year, but that's like way more than you could ever
Mm,
imagine. Start there.
mhm.
So that would be my first point. And I think about that like, for instance, you go to school. So everybody goes to school in some way, shape, or form. Who do you know who also goes to your school, who is the richest kid at your school? Can you get to their dad or their mom? Right? So like, try to get to who's closest to you that you can physically touch and you can actually engage with that human. I would start there because it's lower stakes. So, one, if the richest guy on your block or in your college, that's a friend of your, that's a dad of one of your friends, owns a big sprinkler company that makes a couple $1 million a year.
Mm,
Start working with that. And while you're there, give yourself a deadline, 6 months or a year, learning at this level, and then level up. Who's now the richest
mm,
person times 2x you can get to? I think the biggest problem is people confuse fame
mhm.
with being rich. They go after you and I. We're not the richest people. I mean, we do pretty good, but like we're not the richest. And by the way, who has more competition?
Yeah.
Everybody's in your and my email inboxes just because we have a lot of followers. I would never go to an influencer and try to play this game. I would go to the guy who runs a sprinkler company that nobody is talking to
Mm,
at all, but he makes a ton of money. And then you cozy up to this guy and you go, "This is incredible. What do you do? You did this with sprinklers? How much does your company make? Whoa, I want to be like you one day. Can I intern for you or apprentice for you? I'll do whatever you want." Do you know what that is going to feel like to a guy like that, as opposed to me or you? We're going to be like, "I don't have time. I have too many interns." So go
mm.
where the water is the shallowest, is what I would start with.
That's a cheat code right there. I mean, honestly, there are probably people in our neighborhood now who are secret multimillionaires that we could definitely learn from. Um, but once I find these people, what is next? I read this book called The Go Giver, and it's about giving more than you receive. When you come across someone saying, "Hey, how can you help me?" Most people are put off by that. But if you say, "Hey, how can I help you?" Similar to what you're just saying, "How can I intern for you?" Um, that does get you a lot further. Um, what's your take on that? And um, like I said, what is next?
You never want to expect something for a gift given. I call it the 10x rule. So I try to never ask for something unless I have given 10x to a person. And we have that across our business too. I think you should do that with young people. So when I was younger, I have a lot of people that I thought of as mentors. They would never know that they were a mentor of mine. And all I would
Mm,
do is I would ask them one question. So I wouldn't go to famous people, but I might go to a
mm-hmm,
normal, kind of high powered exec in finance or something and say, like, "Hey, I was wondering, I saw you did this deal over here. I was wondering why you chose to invest in that company versus this company. If you had time for a one
mm,
sentence reply, that'd be amazing." And they might reply me one sentence, maybe one out of 10 people would. And then I would say, "Thank you. No need to respond further. This was really helpful. I'm going to go implement this in some way." And then I would reach out to them in a couple weeks and I'd be like, "Hey, that piece of information you gave me, I just did X, Y, and Z with it. Really helpful. Thank you. No need to reply. Just letting you know that you made an impact." And that no need to reply and me following up is so rare. I wish people realized that today, that if you want something, follow through is worth its weight in gold. I mean, one of the other things that we do is when people reach out to us and say stuff like, "We'd like to do XYZ for you," I say, "Read this book," and I'll give them a random book. And I say, "Come back to me with a few XYZ questions or things." How many people do you think actually come back? I think I've had 5, maybe. And so follow through is so rare.
mm-hmm,
And what would happen with these people, and I still do it to this day. I had one guy who was, what was his role? He was quite high up at a company called State Street, and I can't remember what his role was. But he said to me one day, I was in New York. I had played that game with him for probably years. Like, "Hey, tiny little thing, one sentence of advice. Great. Thank you. Here's how I implemented it again and again and again, maybe 20 times over the course of 2 years." And finally, I was in New York and he was in New York. And I pinged him and said, "I'd love to take you to dinner. I want to talk to you about a few things." And it was so funny because as we sat down, he goes, "This is the weirdest thing." And I thought, "Oh no, what?"
mm-hmm.
And he said, "I don't really know you, but I feel invested in your success." And I was like, "I know you do, because I'm dripping on you for 2 years, showing you that a tiny little action, which felt like nothing to you, actually made a material impact on my life."
Mm.
And most people don't get to feel that way.
You don't have to have a whole like scroll full of questions. Just focus on one question at a time and follow up. Um, super practical, simplistic, and I'm taking notes on this. Okay. So we've talked about what to do early in your career. We've talked about the power of finding the right person and what to ask them. So we're stacking up the foundation here. What is next?
One of my favorite mentors told me a line that changed my life, which was, It was Bill Perkins. I asked him why he's so successful in so many aspects of his life, damn near a billionaire. And he said, the only reason that I'm successful is I'm faster than everybody else. By the time they have
Mm,
thought about an idea, taken it to a meeting, and started to move, I have already made 3 mistakes and found a faster way. And so his bias on speed is fascinating. If you ever hang out with the guy, it's wild. I'll be like, "Can we schedule a meeting?" He's like, "I'm
mm,
calling you right now." And so he just moves quicker. So in our companies, we implemented something called the 24-hour rule, which was this idea that if we want to win, we have to have a bias towards action. We have to decrease our time between thinking about a thing and doing the thing. And so most people say, well, I'll get back to you on that next week, right? Get
mhm.
back to you on that next week. Hate that line. That is where dreams and money goes to die. Instead, I
Yeah.
say, can you get it to me tomorrow? If all we do different than our competitors is they take a week to do things and we get it done in a day, I don't have to be richer, smarter, or better. I'm just faster.
Mm.
And it drives my team crazy many times, but I'm not smarter. I'm really not.
Mm,
I'm just very fast at a few things and I ignore a shit ton of stuff that I don't think is going to move us forward. So I think speed is the consistency. It's Chris and I were just talking about this. I got annoyed the other day because I was
mm,
what happens is people overthink things. And in this day and age, it happens more and more. They think about the thing and they
mm,
confuse thinking with work. And more often than not, thinking is not working.
mhm.
And this is where people will yell at me on the internet and go, well, if I just don't think about anything and I move really fast, I could move fast in the wrong direction. Yeah, you could, but just iterate, move fast and iterate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what most people don't do. And so I'll tell my team all the time, you're thinking about this way too much. Make a
Mm.
decision in 30 seconds. What's the decision? I'll tell you if I like it, yes or no. I like the decision, move forward. And so ask yourself that in life. It's like Mel Robbins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get out of bed.
Yeah.
Mine is 30 seconds to decision.
This must be a message for me because I've heard this recently quite a few times now. I was watching an Alex Hormozy clip and he said, just be faster, just get it done. I have a mentor who responds almost immediately when I message him. And it's a pattern that I've noticed between people who are really successful. You think they're too busy, but they're like, nope, I got time for it. They create time almost. It seems like they have unlimited time. And I think it's because of what you just said. They just do things faster. And along the same lines, I met another guy who invests in, multi-million dollar companies. And his advice to me was stop thinking and start doing literally the same thing that you just said. He said, most people spend too much time thinking, don't think about it, do it and find out. The quicker you fail and can move on as fast as you can, um, that's how you get to where you want to go. And so, what does it take to have that inside of you to even work that way?
I was with Karl Rove again, who's like not a popular figure, but he was deputy chief of staff to George W. Bush, and is like they call him the architect because he architects most of the Republican races in this
Mm-hmm.
country. And so whether you like it or not, I don't really care. I don't need to like somebody to learn from them. Doesn't matter to me. And so I had him on the
Mm-hmm.
podcast to hear like, what does it mean to like architect the centers of power? That's fascinating. And when I was talking to him, what stood out to
Mm-hmm.
me, I'd been in meetings with him multiple times and at his house a few times for fundraising events. And I would watch him and somebody would ask a question that was like, hey, why did Bob Sanders in Pennsylvania lose this senatorial race? And his response would be like, well, we lost it by, 1,200 votes on the third Friday on like December 4th, 2012. And the reason is because we didn't have this segment of the population come out. And then he would do that for like 5 locations across the country. And I remember I asked him, I was like, do you have a photographic memory? And he's like, absolutely not. I only have one about the things I'm obsessed with. And I
Mm.
think we all actually have that. Like
Mm-hmm.
you've met friends where like they know every score of a football game for Manchester
Mhm.
United ever. Do
Yeah.
they have a photographic memory? No, they're obsessed. And so if you can find people who are obsessed with the thing that
Mm-hmm.
you're doing, it just means they don't work hard. They're just like they think of it as hardly
Mm-hmm.
working because they're so intense on it and they can't
Mm.
help themselves.
Okay. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of the, people that are iconic through history, I've noticed like they seem to be obsessed with whatever it is that they're doing. And I think we just hit all the keys so far. Early in your life or in your early phases, no, it's gonna suck, but work hard. Um, your network is, in fact, your net worth. Um, use the 10x rule to make sure that you're giving before you ask. Speed is the way. Stop thinking so much. And then finally, just become obsessed. Honestly, that could be a book in itself. That's like the blueprint to succeeding in business. Well, not only in business, but life as well. Okay. So to close this out, final question. I still feel like there's always an underlying mindset that we must tell ourselves um, in order to do anything or even do, those other steps that we mentioned before. Um, do you feel that way? And if so, what is your take on that? What is the thing that we should be telling ourselves?
I had a woman ask me the other day, how do I show up as a woman in a male-dominated industry? Because you've done that, Cody. And she said, I've had struggles with it. And my feeling and response on that is this, that what do you think the universe gives you when you tell the universe that I struggle because I am a woman in business? It's going to give you struggle. What do you think the universe would give you if instead you said, I have such incredible opportunity because I look different than everybody here. And
Mm,
if I am good, I am so much more memorable than every Tom, Dick, and Larry in a blue suit that looks just like everybody else? What if the thing that you think is your biggest weakness and the thing that
mm,
makes you feel excluded and less than
mm-hmm,
is actually your biggest strength? And if you could flip your mindset on that, how much more money and opportunity would you have? And how much more interesting would you be for other people who are wealthy and successful to be around?
mm-hmm,
Do you want to be around somebody who is labeling themselves as a victim and complaining all the time? Or do you want to be around somebody who thinks that the world is full of opportunity? And it's a hard lesson to learn because the truth
mm,
of it is business is hard. You will be shit on. People will keep you out. People will judge you for your skin color and being a woman or a man or not, for sure. But don't let that into your psyche. Instead, choose the opposite and watch what happens.
mm. That goes back to the topic of ownership. You can take ownership of not only the life around you, but the life that's inside of you and your perspective, because your perspective literally can change everything.
Exactly.
And I think that's super important as well. If you want to be successful, it's like, are you a victim or are you actually taking ownership of all of the outcomes? That's why I love the book Extreme Ownership so much.
I posted the other week and I was like, well, we might get something interesting on here. And like, for instance, I believe that the word, I call it Latinx because I think it's funny, but Latinx is the most ridiculous thing you could ever call a Latino. Why? Because it doesn't exist in our language. Spanish, the word Latinx, it makes no sense to anybody. So I think it was made up by a bunch of white people at Berkeley, is my joke. And that in fact, if you went to Latin America and you said, how does it feel to be a Latinx person? They would laugh you out of the room. They'd have no idea what you're talking about. And I said that on social media, and I thought I was going to get so much
Mm,
hate that I would have to not look at it for a while. And what happened? A bunch of people were like, you know
mm-hmm.
what? Yeah, I agree. So I actually think that if you want to beat the curve today, do not be woke. Do not be
Mm-hmm.
annoying and victimized and woke. Instead, watch what happens when you start being a little based today, when you start saying the quiet part out loud. And for the first time in
Mm-hmm.
probably since pre-COVID, I think the world is
Mm-hmm.
changing. And I don't think that means you should be a jerk or be divisive. And I think we should protect comedy at all costs, especially in dark times. But I do think that that type of person is no longer interesting. And if I'm right, that means that a lot of young people have to change our
Mm-hmm.
perspective because for a long time, we have been able to get away with things like saying, because I am a woman, because I am a Latino, because of this, you should give me that. And I think the world right now is starting to say, I don't fucking care. We're all human.
Yep.
And that's uninteresting
Mm-hmm.
to me. So we'll see if I'm right, or you can tell me in the YouTube comments if I'm just a privileged asshole.
I mean, honestly, I think that's true. a big proponent of just taking ownership. You know, you can achieve anything you want in life, regardless of who you are or what sort of setbacks you think you may or may not even have. But I think that's a great way to end it. Take ownership. But this has been a wonderful podcast. Um, whoever is watching this, I hope you've gotten value from all the wisdom that has been shared. And until then, I'll see you on the next one.